Hi YouTube, welcome to my updated C++ programming tutorial for 2020. So I've already done this before, well I've done the course before, I've made a course like a year ago now, so you may be like, why am I redoing it? I've already done it before, and the answer is quite simple really. There were certain concepts that I felt could have been explained a bit better. There was various issues with like mic quality, stuff like that. So I thought, I'm just going to completely redo the course. Just give it more structure, which will hopefully result in like a better, more optimal learning outcome. So, a big question you may have if you programmed before, or even if you haven't, why learn C++? There's so many languages out there. Why should I commit my time into learning a language like C++? And I can answer that, well, in many ways, but the way I would choose to go about it is firstly, control. Control, the amount of control you have over your program or your software when you write in C++ is, very great. And that's something I really like about it, like the more low level aspect. Like, you have to do certain stuff in C++, which other languages like Python may take care of it for you, but that inevitably results in less control. And that's something I love about C++, the controls there, which also results in, you being able to optimize more, which results in, you know, faster, faster performance, which is why, it's one of the reasons why games are tend to be developed in C++ and not in Python. There's many other reasons, but that's one of them. Okay, so there's also, well, actually the biggest benefit I would say, which, one I really think is important, is it's used in industry. There's no point, well, there is a point, but if you actually want to become a software engineer, you don't want to be learning languages that aren't used in industry, because what's the point? You may love the language, but if the industry requires you, certain languages like C++, Python, whatever, there's no point learning a language that, no industry or no one in the industry is using, because they're not going to hire you. That's just how it is. So C++ is so versatile. It has such big use in industry, from game development to operating systems to bloody just general software. It's used so much. It's one of the big, most popular languages in industry, and I think it's, that alone makes it, one of the languages you should consider investing time into. And again, with the versatility of C++, I love the fact that, it can be procedural, event driven, or object oriented. I like that sort of versatility. And that may not, what I just said may not make sense to you, but don't worry, we'll explain that at a later point during this series. So, now I'm going to explain what you're going to learn from this course, and, what I'm going to, how I'm going to tailor it, if you will. So in this course, I'm going to assume you have no programming experience at all. So, people who've already programmed before in other languages may come here going, okay, yes, I get that concept. Just move on, because I'm going to explain stuff like variables, data types, which, if you programmed in any other language, you probably have a decent understanding of, or you should do. So, yeah, this course is kind of going to, take you from novice to competent programmer. And I'm more going over you know, the sort of programming fundamentals, but I'm using C++ as my language of choice to demonstrate that. So this will be more of a programming fundamentals series, but you're learning C++, like that's your language of choice, but you can apply those concepts to basically any language. The difference will be there will just be different syntax, really, in many cases. So, maybe printed to console, the actual, syntax you would use to print the console just may be different for each language you learn, but, the end result is the same. You print a string to console, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. But I will expand on this, maybe do another course later where I go into advanced concepts and, really bring your understanding to a new level. But right now, this is going to take you from novice, so I'm assuming you're a novice, and I'm going to take you to, competent programmer, where you have a strong understanding of the fundamentals of programming. All the key concepts that almost every language utilizes. And we'll go into some C++ specific stuff as well. But right now the main focus is the programming fundamentals, which is what we're gonna do in this series. And I would either expand on this series or I'll make a new series which will cover more advanced topics and various other stuff. Okay, so now I've got all that out the way, let's get into some programming. So what you're going to need is an IDE or integrated development environment, such as what I've got here, Visual Studio. It's my preferred IDE of choice, but you can use whatever you want. If you've never programmed before and don't even know what an IDE is, I would recommend you use Visual Studio just so it's easier to follow along, and you don't have to worry about learning the IDE because right now this is a programming course, not how to use an IDE course, which is very simple anyway. But just download Visual Studio if you've never programmed before. I'll leave the link in the description. If you have, just use your IDE of choice and we'll get into it. But I think, well, the first thing I should explain is what's an IDE. Well, an IDE is where you write code. It's where you write code, you compile code, and there's various other features of an IDE. IDE is where you're gonna create your software, if you will. So you may be asking, well, what's a compiler? What does that even mean? Okay, so a compiler, because first of all, I'll say the common misconception that many people who don't program they think or they believe that computers understand code like C++ code, Python code, whatever, Java code, C# code. I've seen a lot of people who've never programmed before want to get into it. They make that misconception, and in reality, languages like C++ exist, or Python exist for human readability. Computers understand binary, which you've probably heard of before, which is just a string of ones and zeros. That's the format that computers understand, and we can actually write programs in binary, but it's a pain in the ass, and it's very prone to error, which is why we don't. Because you make one, you add one extra zero or one extra one into a massive string of ones and zeros, then the entire program will break, and that's hugely problematic. Because in C++, it's much more easier. Well, it's much more easier to identify a missing semicolon, and maybe braces that you didn't close in a function than a single 1 and 0 that you just didn't put in or put too many of. So basically the compiler is going to convert the code we write into a format that the machine understands, which is binary, ones and zeros. That's the compiler's purpose. You don't really need to know more than that to write code. You just need to know the general purpose of, okay, my code is getting converted into binary so the computer can understand it. That way we can write in a human readable format, and the computer can also understand what we mean by that, which has so many benefits. Okay, so once you download your IDE of choice and get it set up, let's create our project, shall we? So create new project over here. We'll go to console app, or just type it in here. Console app. And we'll go to our console C++ app. Click on that, click next. We could type in YouTube series 2020. Okay, another one already exists, brilliant, that's a good start. Okay, so YouTube series updated, fine. Happy now? Okay, now we'll create this file, and we're left with some code, which essentially is just creating a hello world program for us, which, if you program before, you know that hello world is simply probably the first program you'll create when learning a new language. It just prints the string hello world to console. We can remove the comments, we don't really need them for the sake of this, and it will just clear up some clutter. Okay, so so in the IDE we've got this area which represents our code. Our code is all in here. Obviously this is representing the line of code, so if you might get an error down here when you try and compile. It would say error on line 23, so you can just look down here and find line 23 and see what the issue may be. So if I write, if I put something here, that's line 13, I'm pretty sure it's self-explanatory. I don't think I need to explain it any further than that. But anyway, let's get this. Let's run this code, shall we? And then I'll explain how it works. So we press F5. You see hello world is printed out to console. So hello world is printed out. How does that happen? How does that work? Okay, so let's get into it. First, I'm going to explain what this means. This is a preprocessor directive, which you don't have to understand what that is right now, but you probably going to want to understand why we've wrote this. Okay, so we wrote this, include IOStream, because C++ by default does not have any input or output capabilities. So we need to basically, we're including IOStream, which is a library, which essentially what a library is basically a bunch of code that has been written by someone else, which we're basically dumping into the top of our program. So we're basically including all the code in this IOStream library and putting it in here so we can access and use some of its functions or methods, if you get what I mean. And we use it because we need to use it to print out hello world, because if we remove it and click, you see there's an error, namespace standard has no member cout, and if we press F5, there was some build errors. You know, cout is not a member of standard, cout is an undeclared identifier. So it's very important we include IOStream, because we need, if you want to print out text to console, because that's the function. That just saves us a lot of time. You don't have to write your own function that does that. You can just access that function that someone else has wrote. And you get a lot of that in programming. A lot of programming maybe, you know, why spend hours writing your own, your own function that, you know, you can include a library that already does it for you. So, and it's just more efficient anyway. So that's including a bunch of functions that we can access that just, you know, give us a bunch of features basically. And then we've got this int main, and this is the main function. Now, what's really important to understand, well, I'll explain functions in a later, you know, at a later point. But all you need to understand for now is the main function is the starting point for your program. So every program, you know, well, in, you know, your computer, the software needs to know where to start. You know, where do I start in the program? Or because there's a bunch of code here, you know, where am I going to start? And the answer to that will be the main function. So it starts executing code on the first line in the, you know, in the main function. So if I created another function, which you don't have to understand what this means really, you just have to know this is a function. Main, we could say test, and we could, you know, put some parentheses, and we could simply output, you know, the string, say, you know, we could just say test, and then we could do that. And if we press F5, it only prints out hello world. See, like, this is the starting point for our program. This is above, you would think, you know, if you've never programmed before or new to C++, hang on a minute, that's above, you know, you know, the main, this line of code here. So surely it should just execute, you know, top to bottom. And that would be conventional wisdom, yes, but in C++, it always starts at the main function. That's what you need to know. So we start here, and you also may notice this never even gets, you know, printed out to console at all. So why is that? Well, essentially at the end of the main function, you know, the program's over. Well, there's no more lines to be executed in the main function. So what you would have to do is either put this in here, and then if we run that, it would then print out hello world, then test, or you can call this function, which I'll explain at a later point. Okay, so let's get into what this means then. This may look weird, especially if you come from Python, and it's like, in Python I just used the command print, and then, you know, in parentheses I just put this, you know, speech marks, and then the bracket in the string I want to print out the console. This is a weird way of doing it, but let me explain. Okay, so this is like sort of the library, if you will, the standard namespace, because this is in a namespace, and this is sort of the function that you are calling. So to explain that a bit better, imagine you have a folder. In the folder, you have a bunch of files, right? So essentially what we have here is, this is the name of the folder. We're saying in the standard folder, and this is the 2 colons represent, you know, basically break up the folder and the file name, and we're basically saying in here, this is the file name that's within the folder. That's essentially how you can think of a namespace. We'll go into much more detail on namespaces at a later point, but essentially that's what you need to know. So we're saying in the standard folder, which may have many different functions, we want this particular function. We break it up with the 2 colons and specify the function we want. The 2 chevrons you don't need to know much about, but just for now, just know, that's what we need to, sort of output text to console. And then we got hello world. And something you may notice if we run this code again, it says hello world, and then there's a break, a line break. Sort of, we print out test on the new line. And the reason for that is, and I can show you another thing, like if I can actually get it, if I put, say, higher here, higher is also printed on a new line, and test isn't. There's no break here. So why is that? Well, the /n, automatically is detected as a line break, so it would just end the line. So if you want to break up a long string onto and print it out on separate lines, you could just do, /n, 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 and if I press F5 and run it, you see higher. See? So /n breaks up sort of lines, or breaks up strings, onto separate lines. Sorry, I can't speak right now. But we also have a function included in this library here. You see the standard, and instead of calling the cout function, which prints text to console, we're printing out the end L, which ends line. It forces the line to end. So, there's various means, various different things you could do to achieve the same goal. That will just end the line, and so will /n. So just, choose your preference. And okay, so that's essentially the basics of programming. We're going to get into some, advanced, we're going to get into some more topics, on later videos, and we'll learn about variables, data types, functions, and, loops in various episodes. And by the end of the series, you should have a complete understanding of, programming fundamentals. So just play around with this, print out some strings, play around with the line breaks, just, print out whatever to console, and, just say, hi, my name is, Ryan, and end the line. And something I should bring up, actually, I don't want to miss that. At the end of every line, you need a semicolon. So just keep that in mind. So I didn't want to miss that. That would have been silly of me if I if I missed something as basic as that. But yeah, you need a semicolon to represent the line has been ended. But yeah, if we print out, hello, hiya, test, hi, my name is Ryan. So just play around with that. Play around with printing text to console, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video, and we'll discuss variables.